Chapter 15, Section 4, Succession and War. So here we begin our honest and sincere study of the unit of the Civil War. So we actually start with the previous section, 15.4, because as it shows you in the title, it talks about Southern states leaving the Union and then the outbreak of war that begins the Civil War in the United States. So the first question goes back to the idea of this Harpers Ferry attack in 1859. We talked about this. This was done in October of 1859 by John Brown, and it's his attempt, here he is, at seizing a federal arsenal down in what was Virginia. Today it is West Virginia. And his attempt, an arsenal being a place of the storage of weapons and ammunition, his followers here try and seize this federal arsenal in this small little town. Only about 18 to 20 different followers go with him on that one day in October of 1859. They hope to break in, seize the weapons, and then arm the slaves and end slavery that way. The attack doesn't go well. It's not overly organized, and so they do break in. They take some people hostage. The next thing knows, they basically barricade themselves inside a structure. They wait out through the night. The next day, the Marines arrive. They storm the building. Some of John Brown's sons are killed in the attack. He's wounded. And eventually, what happens is he is put on trial for treason. He is found guilty and then executed in December of 1859. Actually, yeah, 1859. So, that is the events at Harper's Ferry. So we have to always ask ourselves, hero or criminal? Well, in the North, they think of him as a martyr, that he had gave his lives for slavery and the ending of this terrible institution. Southerners thought of himself as a terrorist and a traitor that had attacked a federal installation. And the South was also shocked by how the North had treated him. And so you can sort of see a differing of opinions on who John Brown was. So the next thing on our chart was the election of 1860. You see the four candidates here. So if we just go to the next screen, just to review who they were, this is Stephen Douglas. He is a Northern Democrat, supporter of popular sovereignty, a way of people picking if they want to have slavery in the new territories or not. The Democratic Party is split, and so the Southern faction goes with John C. Breckinridge, who was the former vice president, and he is a supporter of the recent Dred Scott decision of 1857. Then you have this compromise party known as the Constitutional Union Party, known as John Bell's party, and then finally the new party on the scene, which is the Republican Party and Abraham Lincoln. So these are your four candidates. Now the question that's up here says, Lincoln's name did not appear on the ballots in which area of the country. That is all throughout the South. How is Lincoln able to win the presidency even though he only receives 40% of the vote? Well, remember, he needs to get the majority of the electoral vote, not the majority of the popular vote. So if we look and see, the answer is pretty much the idea that the party that splits, so there's four candidates, the Democratic Party splits, and since it is the one that splits, it usually is the one that loses the election. Lincoln's able to win because the more populated states in the country were in the North. So your answer should be the more populated North simply outvotes the less populated South. If you look here at this map, you can see the blue are all the states that went for Lincoln, and just key in on these ones of the Midwest. You can see how large the numbers are, whereas if you look throughout the South, you see how sparse and low the numbers are. So Lincoln did not need any of the southern states to win. He wins pretty handily here, 180 electoral votes. And you can sort of see where the compromise candidate won throughout basically the region that's between North and South. And then you can sort of see here that Douglas wins Missouri, and he also wins part of New Jersey's returns. But what's really weird is that he is actually second. This is his number. I know a little bit of it's cut off. That's his number of how much he wins in the popular vote. So he wins 30% of the popular vote. But when Lincoln wins, this starts a chain of events that leads us to the outbreak of the war, which is Southern states had always threatened to, if Lincoln wins, they are going to secede. They feel their hand is pushed, that they have no other option. And so that's what moves forward. So the next question, though, is there is an attempt right here at a last-minute compromise. Here it is. It's proposed by this guy, John Crittenden. And pretty much what it was an attempt to reinstate the Missouri Compromise. The idea of the line where it would restrict or allow slavery to go into the territories. Well, both sides reject it. The North rejects it because they had just won an election, feeling that they had heard the will of the people, and they want slavery restricted. The South rejected it because they felt that they had already charted their path and they were going the route of secession and the creation of their own independent country. Crittenden's actually going to have the Brothers' War, sometimes the Civil War is known, happen in his own family. He actually has a son that fights for the Union and a son that fights for the Confederacy. And it's going to, very much devastate his family due to their differing loyalties. So the next one, I'm just going to show you. The Confederate States of America are obviously formed in Montgomery, Alabama in February when 7 states meet to basically inaugurate a new president. So on the next screen right here, you'll see South Carolina obviously is first because they do that in December of 1860. And then here are the ones and the order that they went. Now, you do not need to know the dates here. They're just there for your understanding of how quick secession started to roll into early January, and then by February, Texas becomes the 7th. If you look here, you can just see it in a different way with color. So you have the blue, which are the Deep South secedes first, and then you see the next wave that we'll talk about at the end. So here is the original flag of the Confederacy. You can sort of see the 7 stars that stand for the 7 original states, but most kids tend to think of this when they think of a Confederate flag. This is what is known as a battle flag. That's why it's so named, because they would fly this in battle to avoid confusion and lead to better communication across the battlefield. If you didn't catch it the first time, the official name of their country, obviously the United States of America, is taken, so they come up with their Confederate States of America. The reason Confederate is a loose arrangement of friendly states where the states hold most of the power and not a central government. So if you ever go to a museum and you see things that say CSA, that stands for Confederate States of America. The person that they pick for their president is Jefferson Davis. Here he is. Jefferson Davis is not running. He is just sort of selected. He's a senator from Mississippi. He had been a Mexican War veteran. He had served there. He had also been a senator. He had also been a Secretary of War under a previous president. So he had a lot of government experience. He was just sort of informed at his plantation in Mississippi that they had selected him as President of the Confederate States of America. He then travels from there to Montgomery, and that's what happens here. You can sort of see a scene. This is still there today in Montgomery, Alabama, the inauguration of Jefferson Davis as the President of the Confederacy. As we mentioned, the first state to secede, and when does it occur? That is South Carolina, of course. Lincoln's elected in November, and by the middle or late towards of December, South Carolina has long threatened this, and they become the first to secede from the country. So the Union is dissolved as far as they are concerned. So they are the first ones out. Here is what that paper would look like if you had been around at the time. So as you see, it was passed unanimously, and they believe that they're the first state into a new country. Final things here. The importance of Fort Sumter. Well, the importance of Fort Sumter is really simple, folks. That is where the war begins. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So Fort Sumter is a fort in Charleston, South Carolina, okay, in the harbor. So you can sort of see it right down here. So we're looking at South Carolina. That's where we're talking about. This is the way it would have appeared in 1850s and 1860s. And so you can sort of see it's a mason fort on a man-made island in the middle of Charleston Harbor. So there's Charleston, and then you can sort of see there is Fort Sumter right in the middle. So what had happened was all of the other various forts throughout the South had basically surrendered to various Confederate forces to avoid conflict and fighting. So what happened in Charleston is that there were troops inside Charleston, and some of these other forts that you see surrounding Charleston. And so what they did, those men that wanted to remain loyal to the Union and did not want to go back to, let's say, southern states where they were going to sign up for a Southern Army, they moved out here into Fort Sumter right after South Carolina voted to secede, which was in April. Well, I'm sorry, it was in December. It's now April, so you can sort of see they're running out of supplies. And so the new president, who came in March, has a decision to make, and that is, should you resupply Fort Sumter? Should you surrender Fort Sumter? What is the choice? And so what Lincoln decides to do is he decides he is going to resupply Fort Sumter with just provisions for food, no weapons or anything like that, and he actually informs the governor of the state that he's going to do that. And he realizes that he does not want to be the one to fire the first shots of the war. He wants to put that into the hands of the Confederates if they so choose. So what happens next is that the commander of Confederate forces that sort of ring the harbor tells the commander of Fort Sumter that he must get his surrender by a certain time or he has been going to fire on the fort. So if we look here, this is the way it looks today. Obviously a visitor center in there, but you can sort of see the way the fort used to look, right? Trying to protect it. So here's a different one. You can sort of see this is all of a man-made island. It's not a natural island. So it's something built to protect the city of Charleston from foreign invasion, surprisingly, after the War of 1812. But the Civil War begins, and what happens is President Jefferson Davis decides I can wait no longer, and he orders his men who are surrounding it to fire on Fort Sumter, and that occurs early in the morning of April 12, 1861. So that begins the Civil War. When they fire those first shots, that is when violence has started, and that is when we consider the Civil War beginning. Now, you can sort of see for about the next 30-some hours, there's the bombardment of the fort, and then you can sort of see the flag that I shown before flying over the fort. So, firing on Fort Sumter means the war has officially begun. Last but not least, what action by Lincoln makes the Upper South, those states of Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, secede? And what happens is Lincoln calls for 75,000 troops. These states feel that's the final straw. He is going to invade sister southern states, and they cannot stand for that, so they decide to secede at that time and join the other 7 states. So that's where we end 15-4.